all you Feminerds out there. Welcome to File 741. We are very excited to have a special episode today. We are going to be discussing the comic Flat Track Furies by Moriah Hummer. We are here with her today to chat about her comic. I'm Beckah.
And I'm Leigh.
Hey everyone, I'm Moriah. My name is Moriah Hummer, and yeah, I create and draw a comic called Flat Track Fury. And it's just about a team of roller derby ladies, and they like to fight monsters and crime in their town. And the comic is really just about, teamwork and friendship and acceptance and that kind of environment.
First question, is your comic based on your own less monstery roller derby experience? If so, do you still participate, and which league are you affiliated with?
So that's always a question that I get. Is it, based on my roller derby experience? And I always tell people it's autobiographical and the monsters are included. But that's not true. No, it's, it kind of is and it kind of isn't. So I started roller derby in 2012. So I've been playing for about 6 years. And I really liked a lot of elements about roller derby, and I used them to influence the story. So there's a very common theme in roller derby of it being a very inclusive environment, right, where people can come and feel safe, no matter their, gender or sexual orientation or anything like that. It's just like a very safe space for a lot of women and people who are, transgender, and that definitely influences my comic book, where I really want it to be a safe space for women and to kind of show tolerance and that sort of thing. The roller derby bits are definitely inspired by my roller derby career. I try to stick to the rule set as close as I can, but our governing body, the WFTDA, changes the rule set so much, so it's kind of difficult. But it's kind of based on the friendships that I've made and the lessons that I've learned in roller derby. But I will say that I took a lot of liberties with the story because I didn't want it to be a complete roller derby centric comic, if that makes sense.
Sure. Mm-hmm. So what position do you usually play?
I am a blocker, and we kind of make up our own words for things, but I like to call myself a killer because you have some blockers that are playing offense, and you have some blockers who are really just trying to kill the jammer, right? They're just trying to stop the jammer as much as possible. And so I tend to be that person. It's a really physical and aggressive position, which I really, really love. I don't love jamming. I think it's like the worst thing on the planet. You can be in shape, but then there's jammer in shape. And it's basically sprinting for a straight 2 minutes. I think it's insane that people do it. You're really just taking your punishment as a jammer for years until you're really good. And so I'm not a jammer. I'm more on the blocker side.
Cool. I do really appreciate. I'm slightly affiliated with roller derby. I am learning to officiate with Denver Roller Derby, and I really enjoyed how you can feel the motion, even though it's a medium where the images are still and you can't necessarily see the action because it's not animated, but you can really feel that energy and that motion within your images.
That's cool. Yeah, thank you. I didn't know if that would translate. It's really hard to draw action scenes. Honestly, I didn't really realize how hard it was until I started doing it. But yeah, it gets really tricky really fast. And the sport of roller derby, a lot of it is about momentum, and so that really does play into a factor of, can I really represent that in a comic book?
Well, I think you did.
Thank you.
So were you an artist first or a comics enthusiast first?
My path in comics has been kind of weird. I would say probably an artist first. I always doodled in high school, and I took a few art classes, but I was really doing other things in high school than drawing, and so it wasn't really something that I was paying a lot of attention to or putting a lot of work into. So my friends got me into Justice League, the animated series, when I was in college. I kind of fell in love with it, but I still wasn't really super into comics. But I did end up changing my major to an art major, and I was kind of thinking, okay, what about graphic design? Or, just really any art medium. And after I graduated college, I graduated in studio drawing, and I knew by that point that I wanted to do comics, but it's really difficult when you're first starting out to just know where to start. It's just a very intimidating process, right? Comics are very structured. They have a specific format. They have panels and dialogue bubbles, and there's a whole printing process that is probably the most frustrating thing on the planet, is like printing your comic. And so I was really intimidated by it. And so I kind of put it off for a while. So I got a position at a local company and decided to do comics as a side project and kind of a labor of love. And I've just been doing that for a couple years.
I think that's one of the reasons why I really am enamored with your comic, is because I kind of feel the same way. I want to start my own comic, but I'm also super intimidated. So I always enjoy speaking with you and hearing about your process and everything like that, because I feel exactly the same way.
Yeah, you really do have to fail forward, honestly. You really just have to, you really just have to fuck up a bunch and learn those really hard lessons. It's always great to have somebody that you can ask questions to, like, hey, what software should I use? What materials should I use? Where do you get your comics printed? So I would really encourage anybody who's starting in comics to find local artists that are, relative to you, and make a comics meetup. We have a comics meetup here in Fort Collins. We meet at Barnes & Noble once a month, and we just talk about things like that, right? What are your problems at cons? How do you utilize the visual space on your table? What printer do you use, right? Like, how do you get the cost of your comics down? Because you can do a lot of research on the internet, but until you really get into it, there are a lot of pain points that you just don't see, and having people that you can text or call or just see in person to ask those questions is incredibly invaluable.
That's great advice.
Yes, thank you. Kind of going along that same lines, do you then publish yourself through, finding your own printer, or do you have somebody that publishes them for you?
So I don't have a publisher. So basically it just means that I pay out of my own pocket to have my comics printed. And when you are starting out, and even when you're not starting out, you can make some really expensive mistakes. And so that's why it's nice to have a publisher, is because they've streamlined that process and they've taken a lot of the headaches out of printing. If you are printing your own comics, you will have to learn about printing, and it is absolutely not fun. It's super interesting, but like, press checks are really important, right? Like, you really have to get a bunch of proofs of your comic to make sure that it's up to snuff. You have to color match, you have to do a bunch of stuff. And so when people say that they self-publish, what they mean is, like, I pay out of my own pocket. Most of us don't have, like a $1,200 printer, like, sitting in our house. We're like printing away our comics. So yeah, I do self-publish. And so that just means that there's a lot of, extra work that comes along with that.
When you were deciding to do your own comic, did you have a story in mind already, or did you think, when you joined roller derby, oh, this would make a great story to go off of?
I didn't have comics in mind when I started roller derby. One of my husband's friends from high school, she had her first roller derby bout, and she invited us. And so, we get in the car and we go to Rollerland, and I didn't really know what to expect. And there were just a bunch of chicks in like tutus and fishnets and just war paint. And it was just really over the top, really fun. And I remember going to that bout and thinking, I don't know if I could do that, right? I want to do that. I fell in love with it immediately, but I didn't really have a lot of confidence. And so I kind of waited until I had a little bit more time. I was going to school full-time and working part-time, and so it really wasn't something that I could explore. So when my schedule freed up a little bit, I started doing roller derby. And I knew that I was going to have to work super hard because I'm not very athletic, right? And I just had never played a sport before. And it wasn't until I was there for maybe like a year and a half that I decided I actually think this would make like a good platform for a story. I just didn't put it together, I think, because I was so focused on learning how to skate and, fitting in and just mastering what roller derby was, that I just hadn't put it together at the time. So it kind of took a while for me.
From an art standpoint, we really enjoy your style. We especially with the color choice that you choose. So what made you decide grayscale with pink highlights? And did you ever experiment with other colors?
So I have a few reasons for it, and it was kind of the perfect storm. I'm going to be very honest with you. The first reason is I am not a good colorist, and I knew that I would get lost in choosing all the colors for the comic book, and I thought, this is going to take me forever. I'm going to simplify this process and make it a very minimalist color palette, and that's just going to be a good decision for me to do from a work ethic standpoint.
Smart.
Yeah. A lot of comic artists will bite off more than they can chew right away, and that's why a lot of people don't finish, right? They just don't end up shipping anything because it's such a daunting project. And so I kind of knew my own limits. And two other reasons were when roller derby kind of, resurged back in 2001 in Austin, Texas. Pink and black was a very strong color palette for the Austin roller girls. And I kind of thought like, okay, cool. What like a cool nod to, roller derby coming back into play, if you don't mind my pun, in 2001, and, just kind of pay homage to that. And as I was making it for the first time, I thought, this really is a comic about women, and it's for women and girls, and I want people to know that it's for women and girls, and I'm taking the color back, right?
That's awesome.
Like pink is not traditionally this super cool color. There are a lot of connotations that come with the color pink, which is really weird, right? Because and I'm gonna soapbox really quick. I'm gonna like tangent really quick, but in 17th century Rococo France, if you were a dude's dude, you wore baby blue, right? So gender color association really changes over time. And we have a lot of ideas when we see a color that, I don't want to wear that because I don't want to be looked on as like a Barbie, or I don't want to wear black because I don't want to be looked upon as broody, or whatever it is. And so I just kind of thought, okay, like I'm going to make a pink comic, and it's going to be a positive color for women instead of a negative one.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it really, really works, and we really enjoy it. On that same note, we really appreciate your attention to detail. As an NSO myself, which for people who don't participate in derby, that's a non-skating official. That they're present, that they're there in the background, and everybody has their own unique pair of skates, which is, every time I go, I'm like, how does everybody have a different brand of skate? How many can there be?
Oh my gosh, you noticed that? Oh my god.
I did. But that goes also to the diversity of your characters, especially Val. So what are your inspirations for your characters? Are they based on anyone you know? Can you talk about that? Safely?
I can talk about that safely. I actually purposefully didn't base any of my main characters off of anybody specific, because I don't want to like make anybody feel weird, right?
Sure.
Or if someone was like, hey, this looks a lot like me. I did, however, go, okay, I've noticed a lot of different body types in roller derby.
Yeah.
And there's some pretty common body types that I'd like to showcase, right? So Val is like this super strong, tall, meaty blocker, and the one thing that I've learned in derby is that fit bodies all look really, really different. We've been taught that that fit bodies all have this like Instagram model aesthetic, and that's just not the case, right? Real athletes have muscles, and they have fat, and they have broad shoulders, or they have skinny shoulders. Like everybody looks really different, And so I thought Val was a really important body type to have. I will say that I've had limitations with drawing different body types because it is a challenge when you don't feel like your skill is that honed in, right? Because Flash Art Furies is my first project. And so I have to really, really work at making their bodies different. And it's a challenge when it's just easy to draw a figure and move on. And so, Molly to me is just kind of like a, I don't know. She has, like a normal rack, I guess. And she has a skinny waist and and hips. And I feel like she's probably the most average looking out of all of them. She has the most average looking body out of all of them. So she's just really representing I don't know what a quote unquote normal, regular body type. And, Dee Dee, we have someone who really hasn't hit puberty, right? But is still playing a sport. And, Sydney, I really wanted to give, that pear-shaped person who has, really wide hips and those beautiful thick thighs, because that person totally exists in Derby. Mm-hmm. Small top, wider bottom, and, their hits are brutal. And then Paloma's probably the one that I struggle with the most. But I see her body type so much in a lot of jammers where they're quite thin, and their hips aren't very wide, and they're very they're just kind of very, what am I trying to say here?
Streamlined.
They're very.
They gotta be fast.
That's actually a really good. Yeah, that's a really good word to use. Is they just have a very streamlined body. There were probably 3 or 4 chicks at in the Boulder County Bombers that really did have Paloma's body, and definitely a few at FOCO, and a bunch of the jammers at DRD also have that body. And so I wanted to make sure that I got that body type in there as well. But you asked me if anybody specific. Yes, there is one person that's pretty specific in issue 3. There's a referee who is talking to Molly at the beginning of the game and saying, hey, if you don't have all your members, you have to forfeit, which actually isn't really a rule in Derby. But Sydney ends up saving her, from a monster spider. And that referee is actually my friend Rocket.
Nice.
She was a ref for, I think, maybe 8 or 9 years. And she always wore the pearls, right? Those were her grandma's pearls. So I tried to get her outfit right. And she had the little visor on her helmet. And then in this next comic, in issue 4, I actually will have my best friend Sandy showcased as just a side character. She doesn't play Derby anymore. But I still wanted to get her in there.
It's fun having monsters and kind of a sci-fi plot within a roller derby story. So without giving away any future plot points, what can you tell us about the monsters?
I can definitely say that they are specific to the town. And there is, there's obviously a person, behind all. I mean, we know it's Dr. Vaunt or whatever. But I think the monsters are probably less interesting than what we kind of discover about the characters around the monsters, right? So the people creating them, the people that are part of Pratt Industrial, those stories are probably the most interesting. I think the monsters are really just there to serve as a means for the team to get closer, right? For for them to learn how to work together, and for them to kind of challenge themselves in their town to discover what's going on.
Okay, cool.
I did really think that it has kind of a Buffy vibe, because it does have that same kind of pacing where you've got a really good mixture of action, but also that character development and seeing those characters interact outside of Derby and kind of what their relationships are and how that changes throughout the issues.
Oh, I'm totally not gonna lie. Buffy was one of my favorite shows. It's one of those shows that I think really challenged I don't want to say the sitcom-y thing, but the daytime TV or evening TV drama that we had. It it showcased a female lead, and the female characters really just got stronger as the show went on, right? Willow really found her voice, and she definitely went through character development, as well as Anya, right? Anya showed up, and you were like, why is she here? And then at the end, she was like one of your favorite characters. And so I think the thing that I liked the most about Buffy was there was a good balance of, this is what's happening in the story, this is the overall arc, but this is really how it's affecting the people around, because that's actually the most interesting part of any plot, is people discovering who they are. And so I like that you correlated to Buffy, because I just thought that show had the perfect amount of seriousness and campiness at the same time.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
We're big fans over here.
Cool.
So how long does it typically take you to complete an issue?
For fucking ever. It takes me so long. So, usually you have, 5 or 6 people working on a comic. So,
right.
So, for people who aren't familiar, you have, somebody who writes it, right? So they're going to write the story, write all the plot points, the dialogue, what each panel kind of looks like, and what each page looks like and how it flows. And you're also going to have an editor, and then you're going to have somebody who pencils it. So that person is the artist or the person who draws, and they do all the penciling, and then they send it to an inker. And the inker really adds, shading and depth, and, makes everything a little bit more, extreme with the light and dark. And then you send it to a colorist, right? And somebody colors it, and then you send it to a letterer, and they do all of the dialogue work and all that stuff. So there are a lot of people that contribute to one comic. And if you have that many people contributing, you can really streamline the process. You can really make it so that you have this pipeline where once the illustrator is done, they can pass it to the inker, and then they get a new script to illustrate. So you can definitely make it a lot faster. Since I do everything, it takes a couple months for me to get it done. And on top of that, I have a 40, 50 hour a week job. And so, it's really something that I do in my spare time. And so, yeah, it takes a really long time. And if anything personal comes up, I gotta kind of put comics on the side. And so it ends up being a process where I really have to hold myself accountable, and I really have to make sure that I'm working on it even when I have a lot going on. So yeah, I would say at best, if I have the script already done, I would say at best 3 to 4 months. And at the outside, it's I've been working on issue 4 forever, and it's really hard to do because my job is really demanding right now. So it just ends up kind of being it is what it is situation, which is terrible. But yeah, I would say earliest 3 to 4 months, and sometimes it can take me 8 months or something like that.
I know it's a lot of work, but do you prefer to do it on your own, or would you rather collaborate?
That is a really good question, and the answer really is, how much creative control do you want to have over your comic, right?
Yeah.
So, right. So it's, for some people, they're writers, and so they don't draw, so they really need to collaborate. And for some people that draw, they're just really not into writing. And so, they have to collaborate as well. There is a certain pride that I take in having complete creative control over what I'm doing. And because I feel really passionate about making this a comic for women and girls, and making it something that I actually want to see in the comics world right now, I don't think I would be okay with necessarily collaborating. However, if some publisher showed up and was like, hey girl, we love your comic, we'll pay to get it printed, and we'll handle distribution and all that stuff, but we'd like somebody else to ink it and color it and letter it, I think I'd actually be okay with that, because it would be giving up part of the process so that I could focus more on the artwork of it, if that makes sense, right? Like I wouldn't need to worry about printing or distribution or any of those things that are kind of the main headaches of a comic. So it kind of depends on what the situation would be. But right now, where it stands, where I'm just kind of doing it by myself, I wouldn't want to bring in any collaborators, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Totally. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that this is your first comic. And so do you have any other ideas rattling around in your brain, or are you just focusing on Flat Track Furies?
So I kind of always have a few rattling around in my brain. Flat Track Furies, honestly, I think I'm focusing on it because I only have 3 issues out, right? And like 3 issues actually isn't that much in the grand scheme of things. It is for me because I'm, doing it by myself, but comparatively, it's really not that much work. So what I would like to do is get 4, 5, and 6 done, and then smush them all together and make them a trade. Yeah. And that's really the ultimate goal. But I'm having a lot of fun with it right now. I feel like I haven't even really explored the story that much, right? You can't really explore the story that much in 3 issues. So I'm really enjoying doing it right now. I don't really have any other plans in my head on the horizon, and I think that there's a lot with the Furies that I have yet to explore.
I know that printing is definitely sounds like it's quite an endeavor. So would you ever consider making it into a web comic?
That is a great question. There's something I inherently hate about webcomics, and it's not the medium itself. It's a different business plan, if that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. So like with a printed comic, I make the comic and I print it, and I can like sell it at cons, or I can sell it online, and I'm definitely not raking in the cash or anything like that. But a webcomic is more about showcasing your work for free, right? So people can like download this content for free or view it for free. And you really try to build a fan base with a webcomic. And most webcomic artists end up selling merch to their fan base, right? As a way to make that income. And so it's a hustle, man. Like a webcomic is definitely a hard road, because you aren't getting that instant monetary value to feed back into your business. Mm. So yeah, it's something that I haven't really considered, because I feel like I sell comics so I can continue to like pay to make more comics. And also web comic artists are kind of great, and they're way better at work ethic than me, because they have really tight deadlines all the time. Right. So yeah, so like they have they have to post every week, or they have to post every 2 weeks. And when I have derby tournaments that come up, or I have things going on at work or whatever, or if I take like a motorcycle trip to like a women's motorcycle meetup, I like the flexibility in my schedule for that.
Absolutely. Speaking of merch, though, do you have t-shirts, or will you have t-shirts? Because I'm like looking at the Flat Track Furies like font with the pink and the like background, and I'm like, I really want that on a shirt.
I haven't really considered merch because I've just been trying to get people interested in the comic. I think if I were to have merch, it'd be something like really fun. I don't know. Merch is kind of one of those things where you can dedicate the time to create some merch. I'm not sure I have the time right now, because I'm just trying to do content right now. I'm just trying to like make the comic.
Sure.
And I honestly, this is going to sound like really weird, but I honestly don't think enough people like Flat Track Furies for me to justify getting merch, if that makes sense. Like, I have a very, very small fan base, and so I'm not sure that it makes like fiscal sense for me to get merch. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah.
That makes sense, absolutely,
yeah.
But hopefully we can get a few more fans for you here.
And then speaking of your lovely motorcycle, which we all are totally in love with, we love all your Instagram pictures. Did you say you're in a women's motorcycle group?
Yeah, I have like a girl gang.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's called the Leigh Fort Collins, and The Litas is like a national group, so you can start a chapter of the Litas kind of wherever you are. And it's, there's no like requirement, like nobody prospects, right? And like has to kill somebody to get into the group.
Okay, good.
We really just get together at Cabo on Tuesdays at like 6:30. We eat food and we get to know each other and hang out. And then we usually plan a ride. So this Saturday we're riding up to Carter Lake, together. Last, like 2 Saturdays ago, we took a lot of our new ladies, like our newer riders, up to Cheyenne, since it's like a pretty straightforward ride on 85. And, they'd be able to, it doesn't have any twists and turns and, any weird stuff. I mean, I think a lot of people know that motorcycle culture isn't really welcoming to women a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of old school beliefs in, especially Harley culture, where, women are really just there, on display. They're there, they're there to look at, they're there to kind of, serve whatever, communal thing is going on. And that's just what I've noticed. Like, I know that some people might disagree with that, but, Harley culture is not my culture, but I ride a Harley. A lot of old school motorcyclists are very exclusive, especially towards people of other races or religions, and it's just like a really weird scene full of really old beliefs. And so when we actually got into motorcycles, my husband went through kind of like a bad bout of depression, and he really wanted a project. And so he rescued this old Honda CB450. It's a beautiful old bike. He rescued it out of this old guy's garage that it had been there for like 20 years. And he got it working, and we were just kind of riding around Fort Collins, right? We were riding around Bingham Hill and just kind of enjoying the fall on this bike. And I remember sitting on the back thinking, okay, it's time for me to take the motorcycle class, because this is amazing, and if I hate it, then I hate it, but if I like it, then I have to get a motorcycle. And so I went and did the class, and I got a bike, and I decided that I really didn't want to be a part of the Harley scene. But once I started investigating, you find that there are actually a lot of women out there that really love riding motorcycles, and they dictate the kind of experience that they have. And so there are a lot of really cool things that go on. So there's Babes Ride Out in October, where a bunch of women ride out to Joshua Tree in California, and it's women only, and it's a whole week of camping, and riding around Joshua Tree. There's also one called Dream Roll, and it's up by Crater Lake, and it's, women only, and there's a half pipe, and people bring roller skates, and, they bring their motorcycles, and it's just a lot of fun. And there are all sorts of, women's rides around the country. So we really decided, I guess I really decided that I wanted to make my own scene, I guess. And that's why I joined this women's group, the Leigh Fort Collins. So, we could all have a safe space where we could ride, and we didn't have to worry about, that kind of culture creeping in on our experience.
That's amazing.
Sounds really, really amazing. I want to get a bike now.
We're like, that's like a queer women's fantasy right there.
Yeah, no shit.
Ride out to California?
Nice.
We just have to do that.
I will basically convince anybody, like any woman, to get a motorcycle if they feel like they want something that's really challenging. And it's also like it helped me get over a lot of my, fears and anxieties about interstates or like riding really fast. And it's just like a really empowering experience. So yeah, I will advocate for it till forever.
Switching gears, slight pun intended.
Yeah.
So what are your favorite comics? Do you have any recommendations for us? Do you have anything that inspires you?
Yes. I love a lot of comics. I wish I had more time to read them, honestly. I feel like when you're constantly doing, you don't get a lot of time to ingest. But I think one of my favorite comics right now is Saga by Fiona Staples.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, I cannot. It's just so good. It's so human, right? It's this story about these incredibly flawed people, but it's it's so endearing and so beautiful. And I think the artwork is this very simplistic artwork that really utilizes shape in a way that I wished I utilized. And I think the coloring is simple, gorgeous, and I just love everything about it. I picked up Paper Girls a little bit ago, and I definitely enjoyed Paper Girls, but I only picked up the first volume, so I'm like kind of waiting. I really like Rat Queens as well.
Yay!
Our last podcast, we just talked about Rat Queens.
Yeah, it's super fucking fun. And it's just like a group of weirdos, right? Like all those women are weirdos, and that's like the best story to have, is that like everyone is really unique. Yeah, and so I just really love it. I really like Lock and Key. I'm not caught up on it, but I just thought Lock and Key was like a really great fantasy series that kind of just went to really interesting places. And I will probably say that one of my favorite comic series of all time, and I have some opinions about it because it's not consistent with writers or with artists, but I love American Vampire.
I like that one too.
Yeah, that one is fucking dope. Like, there's something about those characters that I just really, really love. And Raphael Albuquerque, I love his art. I think it's so beautiful. And the writing is just phenomenal. And so I love American Vampire. I wish it was a little bit more consistent, but I understand that, like artists have different projects and they can't just like spend all their time on this one project, but they have to deliver. So they get a different artist, and all that stuff. But yeah, I really, really love American Vampire.
Yeah, before it came out, I was in New York and I was in a subway station, and they were advertising for it, and there was just this great poster of the lead character that says, "I don't fucking sparkle," because that was when Twilight was out at the time. I was like, oh my God, I have to read this. Fantastic. Very fantastic.
Yeah, the first Denver Comic Con I was tabling at, Raphael Albuquerque was there, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go, and I bought like a commission of Pearl Jones, and I was totally embarrassing and like wasn't cool at all, right? Like I did not play it cool around Raphael Albuquerque. I was just like, oh hey, you're so great. I just want a commission of Pearl Jones. Oh my gosh, and he was so incredibly nice to me. I also really loved Batgirl of Burnside, the one with Cameron Stewart and Babs Tarr and Brendan Fletcher. Like I thought it was a really great revamp of Batgirl, and it was so youthful. It was so fresh. I love the artwork in it. I think it's fantastic. And I also really like Gotham Academy. That was just a lot of fun. I don't know. I'm into it.
Yeah, Gotham Academy did a crossover with Lumberjanes that I bought a while ago. That was a lot of fun.
So how can we support you and your work? Where can we find you, and where can we purchase your comics?
So you can purchase my comics on flattrackfuries.com. And I do have a Facebook page, a Flat Track Furies Facebook page. So that's usually where I post all of my updates, like what cons I'm going to, what I'm working on. I do have a Twitter account. It's at Moriah Pariah, so it's MORIAHPARIAH, but you're also going to get a lot of opinions about things. Like I have opinions about high-waisted jeans. I think they're great, and I'm going to tweet about it. And I'm also going to tweet really dramatic opinions about ice cream and, stupid things like that. So just be prepared.
That sounds great.
Yeah, and then I also have my Instagram, which is the same handle. It's at Moriah Pariah. And it's not all art focused, right? It's not a specific Flat Track Furies outlet. So I'm going to post, pictures of me on my motorcycle, or like making French macaroons, which I did the other day, which was really fun. And just like a bunch of weird things, and my dog, right? So if you don't like dogs, don't follow me on Instagram. But yeah, I would probably say that my Facebook page is where I really focus a lot of my Flat Track Furies news. And then my website, flattrackfuries.com, is just where you can purchase the comics. So yeah, that's kind of where you can find me. In terms of supporting, I love it when people purchase my comics. I also love when they like share my posts, right? So they, share content that I've made, they share artwork that I've made, they just kind of like point back to it. Or even just like commenting on the stuff that I'm posting. I actually really like it when people comment on my photos and stuff, just so I can interact with people. It's just really fun for me. So yeah, that's it.
Excellent.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, do you have an estimate of when your next issue will be available?
I actually don't have an estimate, and here is why. I was skating with Denver Roller Derby at the beginning of the year, but I had to stop because I got like the 9-month injury, right? So like I'm totally pregnant, yeah, which is super exciting, right? Like me and my husband are really excited. I'm due in November. And like, I just don't know what my life is going to be like, right? Like, I just have no idea. So I'm working on it right now. What I am kind of hoping is that, and this is terrible, but like, I kind of want to get it done while I'm on maternity leave.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Sure. Like, I'll spend time with my kid. Great. Like, I'll do it whenever. But like, I really want to get that finished. And then, so I'm hoping to have it for like the next con season, basically.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you would like to share with us?
Yeah, actually, I think comics is like kind of in a weird place right now. I don't know if people follow a lot of comic book artists and writers on Twitter, but there's always some sort of shitstorm going on, which is super annoying. But it's also because we're in this adjustment period. So traditionally, comics was really a male scene. Mm-hmm. 30 years ago, if you went to a Comic-Con, it was a bunch of artists just, sitting at their table, looked like drawing and not really having to interact with fans, and fans would still come up and spend, thousands of dollars at their booth because it was just this really exclusive club that they got to be in of like, comics just didn't used to be cool, and so we're in this weird stage right now where a lot of people are getting into comics and we're asking for inclusivity, right? We're asking for diversity. We're asking for higher standards. We're asking for more. And a lot of people that have been in comics for a while are not really liking those changes. So we're in a really interesting space where we have some older people in the industry, or just some people that have been in the industry for a while, that are really trying to dig their heels in and not really care about representation or diversity. And then we have a lot of new people in the comics industry that are really trying to advocate for it. So the comics world is kind of at odds right now. If you're just kind of like into the Marvel movies and that excites you, it's not really something that you notice. But if you're really in the industry, then it's something that you can't help but notice because people are becoming really loud about it. So I would say if you are for inclusivity, if you really want diversity in comics and representation, and you really want more comics for women, buy comics that are made by women. Honestly, like that's like the biggest thing you can do is, support those female artists and writers, and, go to cons and talk to them about their stuff and buy their stuff and talk about it online. I think the more traction that we can get online, if we're kind of louder than the naysayers, I think the industry will really start to shift, shift in the right direction. So that's probably the advice that I would give, is whenever you feel like, my purchase doesn't really make a big difference, it actually does make a really big difference.
Oh, we couldn't agree more.
Absolutely. Yeah. As comics lovers ourselves, we have those difficult conversations, and we hope that what we're doing here is showing people that there's more to the comics world than Marvel and DC and even Image and Dark Horse. There's these people who are doing that work, and being more inclusive, and there are trans writers and artists, and there are female artists and writers, and we want to showcase their work as much as possible.
Yeah, I think you ladies are definitely contributing to like the positive part of comics, and like I really commend you for having a podcast and like talking about these things. That whenever you have an opinion that goes out into the public forum, it's always okay, like how are people going to receive this? I'm just going to have to kind of be at the mercy of the public or the internet. And so I really commend you ladies for, deciding this is what's really important to us and we're going to showcase it. So thank you.
Thank you. Actually, and I will say, I came across your comic many years ago, I would say, at a Denver roller derby. And that kind of was like my first jump into a non-independent or an independent comic that's not mainstream, and it kind of got me starting to look for more female authors and female artists, and so I would say that you were kind of like a catalyst for me, so thank you.
That's so cool. Oh my gosh, that makes me feel so good.
Yeah,
gosh, that's so cool. Yeah, like it's weird when you discover the indie world. It's almost so overwhelming at first. You're like, I can't like everything. I can't know about everything. This is too much,
Yeah. So, and actually you kind of helped, inspire this podcast too. Cause I that was one of the first things that I had said. I said, I want to make sure that we do Flat Track Furies at some point. So thank you so much for being on this for us. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Like you have no idea how great that makes me feel. Like I had no idea that was the story behind this podcast, and like this was your background, and so I really appreciate you like just telling that to me. That really means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely, and we would love to have you on again and find any ways that we can support you, most definitely. So we always try to make sure that we stop by at derby bouts and different cons to check in with you and everything. So yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, it's a date. We'll definitely do another one in the future. And I'll try to finish issue 4 in a timely manner so that we can actually talk about it instead of talking about it like in theory. I'm like, well, it's on my desk. I'm doing it. I don't know. So,
Awesome. We can't wait.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to be on this podcast and speaking with us. You have been a delight. You have been so informative, and we really appreciate your insight.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. Anytime.
So this has been File 741. I'm Leigh.
I'm Beckah.
Thank you for listening, and please like us on Facebook or follow us on Instagram and Twitter. You can tune in to all of our podcasts on iTunes, Podbean, YouTube, or at thefeminerdfiles.net.